Okay, so I think we are ready to go. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself and give you a little bit about my background. My name is Maureen Blazejewski, and I am the Education Director at the Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress. In addition to my work at the MDSC, I'm also a consultant who works directly with teams in schools all across Massachusetts, and my job there is really to support them with the development and implementation of successful individualized programs for students with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities. I've been doing this for about 2 years. Prior to that, for 17 years, I was a teacher in public schools here in Massachusetts. I taught primarily in an urban setting. I had a lot of different roles. I was a classroom teacher, I was a special education teacher, and I was also an inclusion specialist. So the information that we're going to be talking about today is something that I can speak very firsthand to because it was my practice for a very, very long time, and it's something that I'm continuing to do with the teachers that I'm working with, both through the MDSC, but primarily at the consulting. So I'm excited to work for the MDSC because the MDSC recognizes that teachers need professional support in order to support students in their classroom. They're committed to really find ongoing ways to provide professionals with these up-to-date practical resources. We have actually just finished our education manual. You see the picture here. It's Meaningful Inclusion for Students with Down Syndrome, a resource guide for elementary educators. Many, many years of volunteer hours, long before I even came to the MDSC, went into the development of this manual. And it's a very teacher-friendly guide to all the up-to-date resources and research about learners who have Down syndrome. So I encourage you to stay connected to the MDSC to either check out the manual or just find some ongoing information about the professional development opportunities and other resources for educators. So when we get started, let's get started thinking about our practice every single day as teachers. We know that all day and every day, we have to be thinking of a lot of different elements when we're planning curriculum for our students. There is, excuse me for a second, oops, hold on, I hope you can still see it. A funny window came up. All day, every day, we have to be thinking about curriculum standards. We have to be thinking about student assessment and achievement. That's something that's at the forefront every single day. In addition, we also have to be thinking about our students who have individualized education plans. We're thinking about their goals. We're thinking about the accommodations and modifications that they need. We have students who require additional behavioral support in our classrooms, and students who have significant social and emotional needs. Oops, hang on just one second. Sorry, a little bit of technical difficulty here. So our classrooms are wonderful, diverse places to learn. Students come to our classroom with unique cultural backgrounds, unique socioeconomic backgrounds, and in addition to that, we know that students with disabilities have more and more opportunities to learn alongside their non-disabled peers. So that being said, we know that the students sitting in front of us every single day are absolutely not one size fits all. They all bring their unique profiles to the table, and we have to meet their needs every single day. Our jobs are so complex, and gone are the days when you could just go into your classroom, shut the door, and teach by yourself. looking at her, when was the last time that any of us really sat down at our desk? We can't do it alone anymore. And collaboration is essential. It's interesting because we're all part of big teams, especially when we have students with pretty significant complex learning needs. We have lots of different people who bring a unique perspective and expertise to the table. We have general education teachers, special education teachers, counselors, psychologists, paraprofessionals, elective teachers. Really, every single person can give something unique to a student's programming. And finding time to check in with all those people and get the input that we need from them is very, very difficult. And it's not something that we can either choose to do or not to do. We know that a student's IEP is something that we are bound by as teachers. We must implement the accommodations outlined on IEPs. We know kids need modifications, and we have to make sure that we identify those resources or develop those resources to make sure that curriculum is accessible. We know that our students require specialized instruction, and every single person involved has to be on the same page. So our goals for today are really to support teachers with the development of two things: systems for communication with other members on your team, and the development of individualized learning goals for whole unit and day-to-day. All of those things are really essential parts of ongoing communication with all the members of the team, and that's really what our focus for today is going to be about. Why is this so important? So we know that finding extra time in the day is already a challenge. I can't say, none of us can say to teachers, okay, well maybe you should just work after school and find some consult time. Teachers are already working many, many more hours than are on their contract. And I can guarantee that if any of you could identify a superpower, one of your superpower would be to either add more hours into the day to get things done, or freeze time to be able to finish something before you have to move on to the next thing. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to figure out how to make any of these things happen. So we really do need to think outside the box and find different ways to collaborate and communicate with all the different people on a team. So as I said before, carving out face-to-face time is something that's very, very challenging. There are so many people to collaborate with, and there are so many conflicting schedules. I remember that I would try to get out of my house as early as possible in the morning, drop my kids off at daycare, rush to school, and try to catch the teachers that I worked with either in their classrooms before the day started. I would try to catch them by the coffee machine. I would be stalking them a little bit around the building, trying to just find the time to check in with them. I was a K-4 inclusion specialist, and I worked with 16 different classroom teachers. And each of those classroom teachers had students that were on my caseload that I was working with, and it was very, very difficult to feel like I effectively communicated with them. Even the consult time that's built in on IEPs is so brief, and we all know that for students who have really complex profiles, that 15 minutes can be taken up with one tiny piece of that entire student. This kind of always feeling like you're catching up and behind can really add to a lot of stress for teachers. So what I have been able to, after many, many different ways of trying to figure out how to make this work, I've finally come upon a solution that really seems to be effective and works well for all the different teachers involved. So it's important for us to think outside the box and make sure that we're not trying to find the time to do this face-to-face piece, especially if it's not working. And so instead, we need to really look to technology to find ways to communicate with all the other staff members that we need to be talking to. And I'm a fairly average, technologically savvy person. I'm not amazing. I did lose audio here at the very beginning for about 2 minutes. But in general, the platform that I'm going to be talking about today is Google Docs. It's a free document sharing platform. It significantly reduces the need for face-to-face meetings, and it provides each person on the team with the information that they need to do their jobs every single day. It's something that everybody can access at convenient times for them, and everybody can provide information to. So it's this ongoing, living, breathing document that works very, very well with this ongoing, continuing sharing of information that's really necessary for supporting our students. So before we move on to the Google Docs, I'm going to just kind of put out there that beware of email to do the same job. So, and I have been there. I have definitely been somebody who has tried the, hey, let's email each other every single night to try to communicate. And again, where the challenge for that is that we, email can go back and forth. And then when you want to go and actually access some information, you may do a search for your email, and for some reason we often have a tendency to put the subject line as today, or social studies lesson, or this afternoon in my classroom. Our subject lines are often very vague, and when you have to actually go and do a search to find the relevant information that you need, there are often too many emails to choose from. You'll pick the wrong one, and you're just kind of searching through this web of email that really cuts down on your efficiency and your ability to just sort of, you come looking for one piece of information and suddenly you're just spending a lot of time just going through all your emails. So I'm just, based upon my own experience, email can be a somewhat inefficient way of doing this. So the first step to using Google Docs for something like this is to figure out who needs to be communicating with each other and find a way to get everyone comfortable with this platform. So like I said, Google Docs is a pretty benign piece of technology. It's something that a lot of people will be comfortable with, but yet there will still be people who will absolutely dread trying to figure out another part of technology. Before you kind of jump into it, figure out who really does need to be involved. Is it the special ed teacher, the general ed teacher, and the paraprofessional? Is everybody really comfortable with using this? Some people might be like the guy on the left who just loves any kind of technology that you bring into it. But then there are absolutely a lot of people, especially in schools, who feel more like that guy on the right that has so much anxiety about using any type of technology. If you're comfortable, do a little Google Docs 101 with someone who isn't that comfortable. Have them set up a free Gmail, and just figure out a way to get everybody set up on the platform. There's a ton of YouTube videos related to Google Docs that people could watch. It's something that is kind of a small step, but it's a really important step to make sure that it's going to really work for everybody involved. So we have to think about why it's really important for everybody to get on board with this type of communication. So when we think about how this will benefit different people on the team, paraprofessionals will have more access to detailed information about daily lesson plans and overall learning goals. Even though paraprofessionals are often one staff person who spends more time with that student than anyone else, oftentimes paraprofessionals are the last ones to really get the information that they need. Again, it comes down to consult time, especially one-on-one paraprofessionals are often with students all day, so they're never really involved in any consult time. They will walk into a classroom with a student, or they'll, a subject will start, and paraprofessionals will often say, I really don't know what's going on today. I think we're going to be talking about ancient Greece, but I'm not really sure what we're going to do. Paraprofessionals are often asked to do on-the-spot modifications, and without a better idea of the big picture learning goals of a student, those on-the-spot modifications may not be as effective as they could be. So that's one benefit for using this type of technology. Another benefit is that general education teachers and special education teachers will have a more equal partnership in the development of adapted curriculum. When your consultation or your conversations are always on the fly, or if it's putting something in your mailbox just so you have information for it, if it's not something that's being communicated about consistently, oftentimes either the general education teacher or the special education teacher will have a disproportionate amount of responsibility related to identifying learning goals or identifying resources. And that it just doesn't work as well for anybody involved, really, when that's the case. And lastly, related service providers, if they're someone who's going to be part of this, they'll have the opportunity to incorporate some curriculum goals into their lessons. So, for example, a speech and language pathologist who is working on vocabulary development may be able to use content-related vocabulary to support their goal. Again, having access to this kind of information really makes everything more integrated because everyone has a better idea of the big picture. So I'm just going to stop there and again remind people that if you have any questions or comments as we go along, please feel free to type them in the chat pane. Webinars by design are a lot of me talking, and I want to make sure that there's space for you to ask questions or make comments. So just like I was saying, the most important person who really benefits from this consistent, comprehensive information sharing around curriculum are the students. It just makes things so much better for them in the classroom when everybody is really invested and has a good idea about the big picture. So everybody's on board. Everybody knows how to use Google Docs. What's the second step to getting started with this? You should develop an individual learning goals template. So essentially, this is just finding a way to document the essential learning goals for your student. You want to do this by unit. It's way easier to do this if you start with the big picture than to do this day to day. And I'll give a quick brief example of my own personal experience. I was working with 3rd and 4th graders, and we were doing a unit on the Renaissance. And we were all just doing this day-to-day modifications about what was happening in the classroom. So on a Tuesday, I had a group of students in front of me, and we were talking about the types of food that people ate in the Renaissance. And one of my students raised their hand and said, so you can take a plane to the Renaissance, right? And I was definitely struck with, oh my God, I am not getting anywhere with these guys. They really don't understand the big picture of what I'm talking about. And then the next day I got to school, and in my mailbox was an assignment from a teacher with a note on it. Hey, we're doing this afternoon. Can you modify it for, this group? And it was about humanism and how during the Renaissance, humanism and that philosophy was important during the Renaissance. So I panic and I go online and I'm trying to modify this assignment, that's going to be happening in the next 2 hours. And I'm Googling humanism for kids, all of these different things to try to find a way to modify this for my students, when I was struck with this. These guys don't even understand that the Renaissance was long ago and far away from where they're living. And all of this energy is being put into something that really doesn't support the big idea of what I really wanted them to get out of this unit. So I can't stress enough about how important it is for you to really start with the big picture at the beginning of a unit rather than try to do this every single day. It's much, much more satisfying and much less stressful. And also, when you develop this individual learning goals template, you want to really make it work for you. There's no one way to do it. I'll talk about elements that should be involved, but you really want it to be something that works for you and your team. Before we move on, I just noticed that someone typed a question into the chat pane, and the question is the manual available online? So the manual is available to purchase on the MDSC website. It will eventually be available electronically. We aren't quite there yet. Right now, hard copy is all that we have to give to people, but again, eventually it will be we will have an electronic version. But if you are interested in getting a copy of our manual, you can go to our website, mdsc.org, and you can purchase a hard copy manual. So, okay, so where do we start when we're thinking about developing those learning goals? You really want to start with what you know. If the person who really owns this information is either the general education classroom teacher or the content area teacher. Special education teachers in general don't have as clear an idea of the big picture classroom learning goals for all the students as general education teachers or content area teachers. That's not to say that they don't, it's just that it's something that generally the classroom teacher is able to say, here are the big things that I want all my students to do. The things that you want to include on this type of template are content learning goals for a unit, the vocabulary that you want students to learn during this unit, and skill development. So aside from content, what kinds of ongoing skills are going to be worked on throughout this unit? So I'm going to show you a specific example of a template that is being used by a team right now. So again, it doesn't have to be one size fits all. You just have to find a way to articulate your overall learning goals for your students. So with one of the teams that I'm working with right now, the grade 6 social studies teacher put this up on Google Docs and kind of said, here are my class plans. The way he wrote it was, math and vocab through that kind of activity. Here are the big ideas that I want my students to walk away from. So it was fairly simplistic in terms of how he organized his information. He wrote down, he gave us the information. Hey, I'm going to be working on this basically from March 16th to May 7th. This is a really long unit for my students to work on ancient Greece. Here are the vocab words and the math items. And, when he gave us the ones that he thought were essential, he highlighted those. So this was from the gen ed teacher, and myself and the special educator basically took this and we developed another Google Doc to start to identify what the individual learning goals would be. So we individualized it. And again, I'm just going to remind that content learning goals, vocabulary, and skill development. And this is the actual document of what we all collaborated on with together on Google Docs. So the special education teacher started it. We use basically the same template for different subjects. So we have one that's similar to this in science. This is the one for social studies. And basically, this is what we all work off of together with Google Docs. So when you look at it, you can see that the unit is ancient Greece. Here's the expectation of mastery. And these are the things that we want our students to do independently. So for the first one, student will be able to identify places on the map: Athens, Sparta, Aegean Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and Mount Olympus. We realize that, we're not specifying in this document how students are going to be able to identify these places. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it in writing. It doesn't necessarily mean that some kids may be doing a matching activity or just labeling these things. Maybe pasting Athens, the word Athens to where it's on the map. We're keeping it general enough that we just really want to talk about, this is really what we want students to walk away with. Also, in the 6th grade, we have 5 students, all with profiles that are a little bit different. And with what we created, we kind of were thinking about the student who would be able to do the most within this unit, and then what happens is that we individualize it from there. So of these 5 students, when I think of one of the students within that cohort of 5, may only identify Athens and the Mediterranean Sea on the map. We may take these learning goals and individualize them even more, but this is a great place for us to start because it's easier to pare this down or to modify this than it is to create 5 different ones. Again, it's to create 5 different ones from the onset. It's really definitely something that we want it to be as efficient for everyone as possible. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? I just want to point out where it says down the bottom, the skills focused on in this unit, using research materials, using text, using a web-based resource, using a video. We want them to complete a project that, identifies important information about a single Greek god. So this is, that could be a very modified text that we're going to ask for students to use, but these are the ongoing research skills that we want for kids to, use. Okay, before we move on, I want to make sure that I'm checking some questions. So hang on just one second. Just trying to make the window a little bit bigger so I can read the questions a little easier. Okay, so some of these, okay, great. So some of these teachers, some of the questions are related to, is this just for elementary school? This is actually, I'm giving some examples at a middle school level because I kind of wanted to show the middle of the road. So this is middle school level. This is content where a teacher has mastery of their content. So one gen ed teacher is really focusing on a particular subject. And so this type of planning absolutely works across grade level. Absolutely works across grade level. So I want to just kind of say that, you know, as we go on, you really want to know that it doesn't matter if you're a high school teacher or if you're a second grade teacher. It's really about using this kind of document to collaborate. Another question is related to asking around, you know, should we give parents access to the Google Docs? I wouldn't recommend giving parents access to Google Docs, but once you create a sheet like this, I would send this home to parents. That's what we do. Because the Google Docs is definitely a platform where there's sort of an ongoing paper conversation and an ongoing conversation on paper. And what you want to be able to do is make sure that parents have this access, because we do want parents to be doing reteaching and pre-teaching. But this is what I would print out and give to parents. So we're going to move on just a little. We're going to move on, and I'll get to more questions in a second. These are just more examples of what the content goals can look like in, this is again middle school. Just another example of the content mastery. We'll be able to identify major bodies in the solar system. Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, you know, and its moon. We have on here all of the planets and Earth and its moon. However, for some students, we know that the only thing, you know, their expectations are going to be Sun, Earth, and Moon. So again, we differentiate this between. Here's the key vocabulary that we identified, and these are the different skills that we identified that the students are going to be working on. And as I mentioned before, this is the document, you know, this is the document that we're working on with, that we're going to send home to families, and we really make sure that we put on here that these skills are something that we expect a student to do with support. With support, and again, that level of support will vary with student. We want them to find information in a text to answer questions, use an online resource to complete a chart, use a computer tool to graph a set of data, and identify 3 facts about the data based upon the graph. That's something that we really feel like we're important, and we know that our students can't do that independently. They will be doing it with support. Okay. So one of the questions was related to how do these goals coordinate with IEP goals? So this is really where you want to individualize this. When you're looking at this template and we're looking at the content piece, it says research skills focused on in this unit. Any type of IEP skills that you're going to want for a student to work on, you could put at the bottom here. If a student's, you know, I'm thinking about writing, for instance. If a student has a writing goal, an expository writing goal or an informational writing goal, you may want to embed this in the skills focused on in this unit. So even though we're working on ancient Greece, you know what? We're going to work on writing a paragraph about Zeus. That's what we're going to be working on with this student, and it ties directly to the IEP goals for this student that we've identified. So someone talked about working in a K-5 self-contained class, and so we actually created this for students who are in a self-contained class, and their push-in is into, they're included for social studies and science in the 6th grade. It's tricky if you are doing multiple grade level content in your class, and the question is, if I'm working with a K-5 self-contained class, would you do one skill standard for all grades with a unit plan for each level? I think that you really want to try to do as big of a picture piece as you can. I'm sure it's challenging if you are teaching students from K-5 in one self-contained classroom, because the curriculum goals are going to be very, very different within that classroom. I know that sometimes multi-graded self-contained classrooms might do, you know, if it's a 3, 4, 5 classroom, they might do the 5th grade curriculum one year, the 3rd grade curriculum the next, and the 4th grade curriculum the next in terms of science and social studies. I would, that is kind of a tricky question, and maybe we can talk about it again at the very end. So once we've identified the big picture piece, we really have to start focusing on the day-to-day. Again, like I was saying, it's hard to start here, but once you have sort of the roadmap for the entire unit, it's much, much easier to do the day-to-day. So here's the template we use for the day-to-day. And I know that this is related to one of the questions that's on here. We all have access to this day-to-day class plans. We know that our students need a lot of previewing and reviewing, and you know, that 45-minute period goes by really fast, and it's a whole different ballgame tomorrow. So we really, this is where this is most helpful, because this can be updated on an ongoing basis. So essentially what the general education teacher does is put in the date and puts in her class plan, and then she identifies what are really the big ideas that she wants students to walk away with from her class plans. The other thing that we identify are kind of what are the areas of mismatches and what are the possible solutions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but you know, again, this is not fancy. This is not, you know, you think about your teacher prep program lesson plans where you need to have everything very, very detailed. We really wanted to create a template that was really going to be usable for us and for our teachers. And the reality is that we know that this is the type of planning that teachers are doing. For us, this is, again, a document that we kind of think out loud on. So one of the things that we do is if one of us has a question around something that the teacher wrote, we may put a question on there and highlight it. So if you look down at 3.2, the teacher identified that she was going to show a movie, Why is the Universe Flat? Minute Physics, that's a video. And we weren't quite sure. Is there any follow-up activity for this? What's going to happen with that? So we use that as a place to kind of communicate with each other. So if we take a closer look at this, again, it's a very, very simple template, but the essential elements are what are the plans for that day, what are the big ideas, and where are the areas of mismatch. And I went to a workshop with Richard Villa, and this is really was a huge aha moment for me as a teacher. When we really think about those classes that, and we've all sat in classes with students where we think, oh my gosh, like this doesn't feel accessible for this student, something's not working for this kid. It really comes down to where is this lesson mismatched based upon this student. So to really be able to think about our lessons that way and to be able to think about our student and say, okay, you know you're planning on doing this. Where are the areas of mismatch? What is accessible with accommodations and what does need to be heavily modified or alternate? And sometimes what it will say on the document in this area, in this section is, you know what, if the paraprofessional reads this to the student, I think it will be accessible. Or sometimes it will be on here, this reading is absolutely not accessible, we need to find something else. It's an area where we communicate. And then we talk about these possible solutions. So again, reading may be too hard, possible solution. Let's find a comparable video. Possible solution, you know what, there's a great brain pop that I think will do the job much better. So, you know, these are the elements that we really want to be talking about on an ongoing basis. So, again, I just wanted to show that we also, you know, as part of our ongoing piece, you know, we have our Google Docs to be communicating with this, but this isn't the only way we do communicate. Sometimes on this Google Doc, we will refer to some resources that we've already identified and shared with each other. So, for instance, after we created the big picture plan, you know, I did some modifications, the special education teacher did some modifications, the gen ed teacher went on to teacher pay teacher and got a couple of things. We actually put that all in a Dropbox, so we weren't emailing a bazillion files back and forth to each other. We were sharing a Dropbox where a lot of these modified materials just were living. And so then on this document, we'll refer to the modified data sheet. And we know that the modified data sheet is something that's living in that Dropbox. So just so you know, again, it just has to be something that's usable for the people who are going to be accessing it. Any other questions before I move on? So one of the questions is, what are great resources for teachers to find modified materials for various core curriculum items? That's a great question, and actually that's going to be the focus of our next webinar. I'm trying to make sure, I really want this to be usable for teachers, and so I tried to tackle little pieces at a time. So that is the focus of our next webinar, and we'll talk more about it then. So one final thing I just want to bring up is that a final benefit of this type of communication is that it doesn't completely replace the face-to-face consult, because we know that that's important. You know, we don't want to be existing in a bubble. But what happens is that these templates and the use of this technology makes these face-to-face consult times way more efficient and effective than they were before we started using them. There's a lot of background information that all of us are walking into the consult already knowing. So we may just start right with, how is a student doing with this? We may start with, you know what, this resource isn't really working. We have to identify another one. We don't really have to fill each other in on all this background information. So it just really is starting to make things feel a lot more efficient and user-friendly, and it's almost like you can feel a sigh of relief among all of us, because okay, we're really making things happening. We're not doing everything on the 11th hour. So like I said, we've been using it and it's working, and it's why I'm here to share it with all of you. So we have a couple of more questions, but before we do that, I want to just do a little plug for our next upcoming webinar, Curriculum Modifications, Where to Begin. Okay, so we talked today about, let's identify those learning goals. Where do you begin once we have those learning goals? I'm going to talk about some online resources that are helpful, and for when you can't find those online resources, how can you develop some systems for creating some modified material that is as painless as possible? It's not easy, but it's certainly something that it can get easier. We know that, unfortunately, for some reason, identifying modified materials is something that's really challenging, and I know that across the country there are 8 bazillion awesome pieces of modified materials for ancient Greece, but yet we're still doing it ourselves. So one of these days we're going to figure out a way to share it, but that's what we'll be talking about at the next webinar. And one of the questions before we go is, could you access my PowerPoint slides and templates? Absolutely. I am very happy to share this. I'm just trying to think of the best way to do it. You know, you can always email me. If you go to the MDSC.org website, you can find my email address on there. You could email me, and I'm happy to send it to you. As part of our website, we are going to be really making our teacher resources section more robust. It's kind of an ongoing goal for all of us, and we will be putting these templates up there for teachers to download and use, but again, I'm very happy just to share it. This webinar is recorded, and it will be available on the MDSC.org website and our YouTube page, because our goal is for anybody to access this information at any time that's convenient to them. And so, yes, all this information will absolutely be available ongoing. So before we go, are there any other questions or any ideas before we do anything? Before we end it? I'm really appreciative that all of you took the time at the end of your day to log on and be part of this. You know, I'd love to see you on the next webinars. And before you go, I would love for people to just fill out a poll. It's going to pop up on your screen. Before you log off, just take 1 minute just to give us some feedback, because, again, this is a new series for us, and we would love to have your feedback so we can continue to improve things.
And Maureen, we'll have to go through these one at a time, so do you want to do them one at a time?
Oh, yeah, why don't we do them quickly one at a time? So it's going to come up. Each question is going to come up. Just take a minute to just answer them. We'll give about 1 minute for each question. And, you know, the first is just to give us some information about the grade level that you teach, if you could just fill that out. The next question would be, let us know your position in your school.
We've launched the second poll.
Yep, there it is. It's coming up. So what is your position? Are you a gen ed teacher, a special education teacher, a paraprofessional, a related service provider, or do you have another position in your school? Just take a second to give us that information. Okay, then we can move on to the next one.
Next one is launched.
Yeah. So just let us know sort of the level of usefulness of this presentation. You know, again, we're continually trying to improve things. So as much feedback as you can give is great. Kind of think of it as a 1 to 4 scale, from very useful to not useful at all. Just let us know.
You still have people voting. 69% have voted.
All right, great.
All right, 71. Tell me when you want to stop it, Mo.
Yep, maybe we can move on now. And then finally, let us know about the level of engagement of this type of presentation. It's a lot of listening and a lot of talking from one person. So give us some feedback about your thoughts about this type of presentation to get this kind of information. We really would appreciate that. And that's it. So if you voted, again, we would love to see you for our next webinar. We're going to be posting the registration info for those for our future webinars very soon on our website. So again, go back to the mdsc.org website for more ongoing information. And thank you all so much for participating today.